Leadership Partners. I'm the lead facilitator in an organization that provides leadership training for both profit and nonprofit organizations through coaching, teaching, and mentoring. What we want to do is provide you with a free 30-day leadership training program that allows you to take a look at the kings of Israel and apply the leadership styles that they use to what you do. Now, this is important because what happens is that we're able to see certain attributes that they exhibited and see how they either succeeded or how they failed. If we can do that, then we can actually change the organizations that we're working with through our leadership skills and through the things that we learn here. So let's take a look at this. Now, the importance of this study can actually give us a picture of leadership in the right way and the wrong way of leading. We can also see that there's a historical record of their successes and of their failures. And then the third thing that it actually provides for us is that all these leadership styles either point to a form of servant leadership or a lack of that type of servant leadership. Servant leadership was modeled by Jesus Christ, and we can start seeing that through all the kings of Israel. Now, we recently just finished up a study on Solomon. Solomon was a good leader. He did very well. He was the smartest man in the world. He was the richest man in the world, and the Lord blessed him with that. And yet he still turned away from his God and started worshiping other idols at the end of his life. And because of that, the kingdom was split. Now, the kingdom never split under Solomon, but it did split under his son Reaboam. And we can see his leadership successes and failures as we go through the Bible. So let's take a look at some of these words and see what they actually tell us. So 1 Kings 14:22 tells us, during Rehoboam's reign, the people of Judah did what was evil in the Lord's sight, provoking his anger with their sin, for it was even worse than that of their ancestors. So what we see here is that what happened was that Rehoboam went way to the other side. He completely left the Lord and didn't spend any time with him at all. And in fact, he actually did several things that actually ruined his reputation as a leader. And because of that, the kingdom was actually split. And we see 10 tribes going north to Samaria, and then you see the other 2 staying there in Judah and Jerusalem. So it's a much smaller kingdom, but yet God's promise of a king over Judah actually still remains. So 1 Kings 12:4 says, your father was a hard master, they said. Lighten the harsh labor demands and heavy taxes that your father imposed on us. Then we will be your loyal subjects. You see, the people underneath Rehoboam actually were able to talk to him and say, look, this is what we feel. We feel that if you could treat us this way, then I think that we could be a lot more successful. We'll be happier, and we'll actually serve you well and serve this nation well. And he had to think about it. He said, give me 3 days. So he talked to, first of all, his first advisors, who were the advisors of his father Solomon, which may have been a pretty good idea. And then he talked to his friends. And his friends convinced him that he should actually follow what they had in mind. This is what he came up with. And he followed the counsel of his younger advisors. He told the people, my father laid heavy burdens on you, but I'm going to make them even heavier. My father beat you with whips, but I will beat you with scorpions. This statement by Rehoboam actually divided the kingdom, and it actually tore these nations away from him and moved them up to the north. And in fact, he even put together an army and was going to go attack and bring them all back. He was going to bring them back by force. Now, there was a person called Jeroboam, not Rehoboam, that would actually lead these people north. And we'll talk about him more tomorrow in his leadership skills. And he was actually a pretty good leader, and yet we see that he failed in several different ways as well. Now, this was Rehoboam's failure, that he didn't listen to wise advice and he followed the advice of others. We as leaders need to really respect the people that we listen to, but we also want to make sure that we make wise decisions based off of their recommendations. If I can follow the examples of others who were successful before me and then listen to the wise advice of others underneath me, then I know that I can actually succeed in areas where I know that things can be difficult or more of a trial than anything else. So we want to make sure that we're listening to the wise advice and that we're using that wise advice. The other thing is that we want to make sure that we're actually acting on this wise advice. If we don't act on wise advice, then we're not doing anything, and that'll actually ruin our ability as leaders. Let's take a look at a couple of other verses that actually shed a little bit more light on Rehoboam's failures. In 1 Kings 12:24, we read, this is what the Lord says, do not fight against your relatives, the Israelites. Go back home, for what has happened is my doing. So they obeyed this message of the Lord and went home as the Lord had commanded. This verse tells us that Rehoboam actually listened to the Lord and he valued the Lord's wise advice. Now, he still worshiped idols and he still brought all kinds of different detestable things into the kingdom, and we'll see that even his own son failed in this area as well. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we pay attention to what we know and how we know the wisest way to lead is. We want to make sure that we include God in all of our decisions, but we also want to make sure that we're leading in a way that actually reflects those decisions that we make through the Lord. 2 Chronicles 11:23 says, Rehoboam also wisely gave responsibilities to his other sons and stationed them in the fortified towns throughout the land of Judah and Benjamin. He provided them with generous provisions, and he found many wives for them. So what we can find out here is that Rehoboam actually was a good leader because he was actually taking the opportunity to be able to train his sons and spread them out throughout his organization. If you've got lots of leaders, you don't want to leave them in one place. What you want to do is you want to get them out, get them the experience they need so that they can actually influence the organization that you're a part of. If your teams don't have valuable leadership at all different levels and in different places in their lives, then they're not going to succeed. So we want to make sure that we take our good leaders, that we put them out there, and that we actually help train them in the way that they should go. 2 Chronicles 12:12 says, because Rehoboam humbled himself, the Lord's anger was turned away and he did not destroy him completely. There were still some good things in the land of Judah. So we know that this is a really good promise that we can see that if we turn back to the Lord, if we turn back to the right ways that we're supposed to be leading, a lot of times that can actually save us from bad decisions in the past. And Rehoboam happened to have been one of those types of leaders. So we can see this goodness in his heart and in his mind, and we want to make sure that we can actually follow this along. If we take a look closely, we can start following these leadership examples of what Rehoboam did, both in the positive way and also in a negative way. Now, the first positive thing that we see in Rehoboam's life was that he was trained by his father. The wisest man in the world, the richest man in the world, actually trained Rehoboam in the way that he should go. He even left him advisors. So we should take wise advice from those who are appointed over us, especially if they're preparing us for greater leadership responsibilities. He also humbled himself to recognize his failures and could see where he was lacking or where he needed the help that was required. So he was able to call back upon the Lord towards the end of his life, and it actually saved the kingdom from actually being torn from his hands and the people of Judah being sent out into slavery. It actually happened about 400 years later. Now, some of his failures were that he allowed others to influence him and turn him from the Lord. The entire kingdom paid for it. So if we allow people to turn us away from our leadership skills or start trying to get us to do what they want us to do, what ends up happening is that our leadership skills are wasted and our teams actually fail in the long run. We also can see that in his younger years, he was actually quite arrogant. He thought that he knew better than everybody else, and he thought that he could actually take what he learned and start applying it to his life as well. And once he did that, then we saw that his failures actually multiplied. So what we want to do as leaders, we want to make sure that we identify these different areas where we can change the way that we think and start looking at things a different way. And you're going to see that as a common theme throughout our continuous training here. So if we take a look closely at the leadership of King Rehoboam, what can we learn as leaders? What I'd like you to do is to grab a piece of paper or download the notes down below and write the answers to these questions and what you feel is actually right. How have you taken advice from others? Has it been wise advice? Have you taken advice from others? Have you applied it in your own life? How can you use that advice from others to make your organization better, to make your team better, to make you a better leader? We also want to take a look at what the wise elements of advice that we actually value. If I value the wise advice of others, then I know that I can embrace that and I can actually start pursuing the things that God has called us to do. And we want to make sure that we're able to do that. So this picture of Rehoboam can show us that he had successes even though he was a failure as a king. We know that he was compared to his grandfather David, and he didn't measure up. We know that ultimately we can look towards Jesus Christ as our one true king, and we can see that the leadership of Jesus Christ will actually make a difference in our lives, and we can apply that to us. I encourage you to take a look at this video and share it with others. Share it with your teams. Go to Facebook and share it there. You can share it from YouTube or even Instagram. Make sure, though, that you get the wisest advice and you start becoming the leader that God created you to be.